Good day, everyone. My name is John Megling, and I'm on the system engineering team, specifically the Microsoft Azure team at Tech Data Corporation. And today we'll be talking about Azure Migrate. We have our email address here so you can email us if you have questions. So what is Azure Migrate? Azure Migrate provides a centralized hub, basically a place to do your migration, track it, a unified platform, single place to go to manage your migration to Azure from on-premise. And these are some links I put in that I thought would be helpful. If you want more information about Azure Migrate, you can definitely go here and get that information from Microsoft directly. They have great documentation regarding Azure Migrate. And really there's 4 phases to Azure Migrate that we're going to cover today. The portal setup and prerequisite checks, setup of the configuration server, discovery and assessment phase, and the actual migration phase. So with that, let's go ahead and get to it. We need to start our migration journey, and we need to go to the portal, the Azure Portal. And we go to portal.azure.com. If this is your first time, again, it's portal.azure.com. If you haven't set that up, you'll need to set up an account and a tenant. But once you have that all set up, we go there, we log in with our credentials, and then like anything in the Azure Portal, we can simply just search for what we're looking to do. In this case, we're going to go ahead and search for Azure Migrate. You can see it comes right up. And we're presented with some options here. Just kind of bounce through these options so you can see what's going on. Different options we have with the Azure Migrate server. Again, just showing you some of the tabs that we have in this service. This is an initial portal setup, that we have to look at and get familiar with before we start our journey. The one we're going to be working with is the Windows and Linux servers migrate piece today. The access and migrate servers piece. Go ahead and click into that. The first thing we need to do is go ahead and get started there and go ahead and add the tools that we want to use. We're going to need to create a resource group. In Azure, we can create a new one. We can do that work ahead of time, or we can go ahead and create it here. You can see we have some existing resource groups. We're going to go ahead and create a new one. Get used to naming conventions. Try to name things that make sense to you so that you can find them easily within Azure. You can always search for resources too. But we're going to create our group, and then we're going to give it a name for our Azure Migrate project. And in this case, I'm in the United States, but if you are in other countries, obviously Azure Migrate, and Azure itself works, all over the world. So here we're going to pick our tools. Notice there are other tools besides Microsoft. Today we're going to be focusing on the specific Microsoft tools and just show you some of the ones that are here. Cloudomize comes up quite a bit with our partners also, but today we're focused on the Azure Migrate server assessment. We're going to go ahead and hit next. Definitely want to add that tool. You can see it supports Windows and Linux. It's agentless. And we'll get a roll-up screen that says what we want to do. Always good to check that and make sure you're doing what you think you're doing. And we'll go ahead and hit Add Tools, and notice it'll initialize the deployment for Azure Migrate. The deployment's in progress. And we can track that progress right here from the Azure Portal. You can see our deployment succeeded, and we now have our Azure migration project started. Now we've got our initial project started, our Azure Migrate project started in Azure. Let's go ahead and take a look at actually getting this project underway and some of the things we need to do. And remember, we talked about the phases of the Azure Migrate. We got, Discover is where we're going to start. And Microsoft gives us a good roll-up of where we need to go, so definitely pay attention to this. We have HyperV or VMware. Specifically right on this one, we're going to take a look at HyperV. We'll do another set of videos on VMware. But notice we need to download this file and create this configuration server, which we talked about. So we're going to go ahead and download that. So we're going to need to download that file. It does take a little while, but with the magic of video, we'll definitely speed this up here. But you want to download that file and copy it somewhere where it can be loaded in your HyperV environment. And notice the prereqs, I talked about those. We definitely want to review the prereqs. Like anything in life, do your homework and things will turn out well. Don't do your homework and not so much sometimes. So in this case, we want to look through this Microsoft. We can see it supports up to 300 hosts, up to 5,000 VMs. So it has a lot of capacity to do what we need it to do. There are some things regarding internet access that the configuration server for Azure Migrate needs. Again, I provided those links at the front of the presentation, so go and take a good hard look at all those prereqs. Specifically, we're looking at the HyperV prereqs, but again, also we have prereqs for VMware also. So you can see the different OSs we support. Just want to bounce through these and spend some time showing you that. So our file's downloaded. It's in the zipped format, so we're going to need to move that, take that appliance and move it to our HyperV environment. In this case, we're working with the server that I call Dell HV1, so it's just a Dell server and it's HyperV1. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and copy that onto our HyperV server so we can load that appliance as a virtual machine in our on-premise environment. It does take a little while to load that file, but we'll go back and take a look at, Microsoft, like I said, does provide documentation on how to do all this. Just showing you where you can get that documentation, the support matrix for the HyperV piece. Very important. And you can see prepare the HyperV VM for assessment. Definitely should look this document over. We'll just go through some of this and show you. Permissions is a big thing. We want to create an account that has the appropriate permissions so we can discover the machines and do what we need to do. So as we've been talking about doing the homework, looking into this, we talked about the permissions just a second there. You need to create an account specific for this or use an existing account that has the appropriate permissions. Register the appliance. Again, I'm gonna show you all of that in this video, but it's good to look this over just to see what you've got to do, specific rights that the account needs, how to prepare for the assessment. There's a little bit of PowerShell remoting you need to set up and just enable. Microsoft provides, as I've talked, excellent documentation. So you can download this script and run it just to double check and make sure everything's right for that environment. Don't want to bore you too much with this, but I've stressed a couple times the importance of looking into this documentation. We talked about downloading the VHD. As you can see, Microsoft gets very specific about what you need to do, and even shows you how to load it into the HyperV environment, which we're going to go through and do. You see our files copying. Go ahead and load HyperV Manager. Hopefully you're familiar with HyperV. If not, that's one of the great strengths of HyperV is its ease of use. But this is the main management tool for HyperV. You can see the server that we're working with and our virtual machines that we have running. We've got some Linux machines and some Windows server machines that we're going to demonstrate migrating. So this is the process of importing this virtual machine into the HyperV environment. We're going to go ahead to that location we copied the file to. And you can see there it is. It's a very easy process to go ahead and bring this in. Do have a couple different options here. We want to do the copy the virtual machine option. Go ahead and take a few seconds there to load. You can see where it's going to store it. Just validate that that's where we want it to be. In this case, that's definitely where I want it to be. And then it will start the preparation process of bringing it into our Hyper-V environment. I need to choose a network adapter. And go ahead and finish that off and bring it in. And you can see the machine, we've got it in and we've started the machine, and we're ready to the next phase of actually the setup of the appliance in the configuration server. So as our virtual machine loads, one of the first things we're going to see is the license terms for the product. We definitely want to review those. We're going to need to create a username and password. Defaults administrator. We need to go ahead and give that a password for the appliance. Again, the license terms, it's important to review these just so you can see. Microsoft does want us using the servers as anything. It's for the purpose of Azure Migrate. That's the basic premise of that. But once we accept that agreement, go ahead and create that account. Then it's just like any Windows server. We're going to go ahead and log into that with that username and password we created. Always want to check the version. It's good to make sure we're on the latest version so that you have what you want. It will do an update as we work through this, so you'll see. We'll go ahead and take a look at the appliance and how we get started. So this is the URL that the appliance uses. It's web-based management, so we want to go in and get started setting up the appliance so we can get ready for discovery. Another license agreement to accept. I know we love license agreements. I know I particularly do. It's going to check its connectivity to the internet. In the prereqs, you definitely need to be connected to the internet. We're going to go ahead and log into the appliance again. It's checking the time, so it's always important with anything we do to make sure time is correct on the machine. And it's going to be restarted so we can update it. So it looks like there was a little bit of an update. Once that's all done, then we're going to go ahead and register. And this is where we're going to log into the Azure tenant with credentials in the Azure tenant that have the capability to create resources in there. So always check that and make sure that your account, that's another stumbling block. People will use accounts that don't have the correct level of access to their Azure tenant. But we're going to log in here, and a password for the Azure tenant. And I recommend not storing that, but it's up to you. But we're done with that, so we can go back over to our setup phase of our configuration appliance, and we want to pick the correct subscription. I probably did not. Anyways, I have two of them with the same name, which makes it confusing, but you want to get that right. In your case, there will be only one subscription there most likely. And then the project that we created earlier, if you remember that. And then we just need to give the appliance a name. I always just use the name of the actual server appliance itself that Windows creates, but you can use anything you want here, something that makes sense to you. This is just what I like to use. And notice it's going to register that appliance with the Azure tenant and the project of the Azure Migrate that we created. And then we just need to specify the Hyper-V host. So we're going to need those credentials. Like we said, that we need to have the appropriate level of access to our Hyper-V hosts. In this case, I'm just simply using the domain administrator account. Not recommended. I'm doing this mostly for ease of use and for the video. Which definitely suggests you follow Microsoft's guidance to create a specific account for the Azure Migrate project that has the appropriate level of rights. We're going to put in our server. If you remember, we're actually on the server, so we can see it's the Dell HV1, our Hyper-V host. We can put multiple hosts in here if we want. Sorry about that. But you can see I'm going to put in my host and I'm going to validate that host. We come back and we're green and we're ready for the next phase and start that discovery process. Now that we have everything ready to go and we've done our work, we can go ahead and save this configuration and start discovery. Notice that the host cluster is good there and the status is green. Everything's green. Always like to double check all that stuff and make sure everything's looking good. We've been validated and we're going to go ahead and save and start that discovery process. So we have that communication going, and it will take a little bit for this to happen, but we're on our way to discovering our machines and moving forward in our Azure migration journey. So we have our discovery process underway. We'll go back to the Azure Portal, take a look at that resource group that we created. Remember how I said it's important to name it, something you can remember and find. I'm going to take a look at the key vault real quick just to show you some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes here regarding the Azure Migrate server. Take a look at the activity log. Here's our deployments. Again, all places you can go to get information. If you need to troubleshoot, you can see I had a few things go on there regarding discovery that I had to correct. Our deployment is complete, which is all good. And you notice we create a shortcut for Azure Migrate, and we're going to go ahead and go back in there and take a look at our progress. Notice we have some discovered servers. That's what we want to start seeing. All good things. We can take a look at those discovered servers. It's going to talk about an agent here. Nothing, to really worry about as far as the agent goes. We can talk about that at another time. But you can definitely install those agents if you need to. But again, we're agentless, so we don't really need that. So this tool is a subset of, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the HyperV piece here in our region. Confirm that target. So now we're kind of moving off of that discovery phase and setting up the migration phase. And we need to go ahead and download the Azure Site Recovery Provider. We want to get that Hyper-V host registered there with the actual migration service. So we go ahead and download that, move it over to our, in this case, our server that we've been working with. We're going to go ahead and run that Site Recovery Provider, install that on our Hyper-V server. I'm going to take all the defaults here. If you're familiar with Azure Site Recovery in general in the Azure Portal, then this is going to look real familiar to you. We use, like I was saying earlier, that as a engine to run Azure Migrate. So we've got that installed, and then we're going to need to go ahead and register that. That key file that we showed earlier, we're going to need to go ahead and input that in here from our Azure tenant. I've copied it over. Go ahead and grab that. It's got a reference to our subscription, the vault name that we're working with. You can see it's all our Azure Migrate things that we created. We're going to correct directly. If you have a proxy server, go ahead and set those settings up. And it's going to do what it does. It's a fairly quick process. It's going to register that. And then we'll go back in and we'll take a look at the Azure Portal. And hopefully we'll see we have a registered Hyper-V server with the service. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to need to refresh this. And we can see that we have, once refreshed, we have that HyperV server registered, and we're good to go with the migration piece of this. Start testing migration and getting some migrations going. And we're successful there, so that's good. Now we've got our Hyper-V server registered and we're all green. Green is good with Microsoft and most things in life. Red and yellow mean something's up. But anyways, we're going to go ahead and move on to taking a look at the assessment part. As you notice in the screen, we're starting to see some more things populated here. And get used to refreshing, the screen if things don't show right after you do them. Making a habit of refreshing that so it shows back up. But we've had some Discover servers here in our Migration tab and our Server Assessment tab. So you can see our machines that that came in. We've got some different IP addresses. We've got showing us our cores, our memory usage, disk, storage that we're using, and the operating system environments that we have going on there. And we can get that same look in the Migration tab. We see all the machines, similar statistics. But now we're going to actually try and create an assessment. We're going to create an assessment so we can get an evaluation of our resources. So we need to put in the create a name for the assessment. And you can name this anything you want. Again, you want to be descriptive, something that makes sense to you, so when you pull it up later, you may have many groups of, machines that you want to assess, so you may have definitely more than one assessment, and even more than one group that you want to run assessments on, as you'll see in a second. Here we create a group name for the assessment. I just referenced that. You can create as many groups as you want. You may want to group like your Windows machines, your Linux machines, or you may want to group by workload type, web servers, database, things like that. Any way you want, you can create these groupings. Mine's pretty simple. I'm just going to create a simple group, and I don't have a lot of machines, but we're going to pick the servers that we want to, run the assessment on. Once we've picked what we want, we're going to go ahead and create that assessment. Just double check everything. And we can track the progress of that through the Azure Portal. You can see our group was created successfully, and our assessment, is happening. So we want to run the assessment over a period of time during regular work hours. That way we get a good, reference set of data to look at regarding the assessment. You can see our assessment showed up. Again, the magic of video, I ran it for probably 10 or 15 minutes. You definitely want to run it for longer than that, what you're comfortable with. 3 or 4 days, a week. You can see we get starting to see some statistics here. We can export out, we can recalculate things. We're seeing, number of machines that are ready, some that we need to take a look at. We've got some storage and some estimated, cost related to storage. We can drill down into this so get more information. Specifically, we'll take a look at things that Microsoft's flagging that may cause us issues. And they do give us some information, things to think about regarding those issues that we can look at. We can drill down into that further. And in this specific case, it's not entirely sure what version of Linux I have on this. So this, I think, was an Ubuntu machine. But you can take a look at what's supported and, get comfortable with, the fact that, you want to run it that way, or you might need to make some changes or updates to it. I'm going to go ahead and export the assessment out here. When you do that, and we'll take a more detailed look at the tool here in the assessment, but you can see it gives us a nice Excel sheet of what machines are being assessed. Starts making some cost estimates. List of machines. This may look familiar as the Maps tool if you're familiar with that. and it lists them and lists what we think we're going to do, and it actually starts making some cost estimates, some machine type settings, things like that. All good information as part of the assessment process. Then we can hit the cost detail tab and actually drill down into what some of these costs are going to look like for Azure. So now we've wrapped up our assessment, and we're going to take a look at actually, setting up replication and migrating these servers and finishing off our move from on-premise on these machines into Azure. As you can see, we're setting up HyperV still, and this is the replication piece. We're going to go ahead and select that group that we created, the machines that are in that group, and choose which ones we want to start replicating. So replication, we're going to start that process of making a copy of the virtual machine into Azure. At this point, it's not in Azure yet. We're going to go ahead and set up these resource groups, storage accounts that we're going to pick here, things like that have already been created as part of the Azure Migrate process. We're going to go ahead and set those up and get those going, and we're going to start that replication actually, and it's going to start making a copy of that virtual machine in the Azure Portal so that we can actually do a test migration and actually migrate and actually move the machines into Azure. You can see there's certain things that have to happen here. We can pre-create these things, or we can create them as we go. I've already pre-created these accounts, as you can see, as part of the project. All important things. Important here to notice the size of the machines that are come over. You can definitely modify that here and choose different sizes that are going to happen. These are the recommended sizes by Microsoft in the assessment process. We can tell it which machines are, what type of operating system. Always good to get that all squared away so you know exactly what's happening. The OS disk, we want to double check that and make sure those are good. Any availability sets if we're going to do that. In this case, we're not doing that, but we want to make sure these OS disks look the way we want. You see I've got several different drives on these machines. It's going to bring over all the drives. The operating system disk is obviously the initial operating system disk, or what a lot of people would call the C drive. Get that disk stuff looking good so we know that we're replicating everything. A roll-up screen of what's going on and what it's replicating and the size of what it's actually replicating. And we're going to go ahead and start that replication process. So we can track it as usual in the Azure. We can track that deployment, that resource that we just created. Azure Portal is great about tracking, logging, letting us know what happened, what goes on. You can see everything's looking pretty good as far as that replication process. We can click into that, get some more details on that specific one that's still in the process there. You can see we're now all successful. I'm hurrying this around on a little bit, obviously, just for the sake of time in the video. But it does happen very quick. The replication itself takes a little while, the first initial replication. After that, all we're replicating is changes to the machine. So the replication is an ongoing process between what you have picked on-premise or in another cloud service and what you're replicating into Azure. Haven't showed up yet. Like I said, you've got to get used to hitting that refresh button, or if not, you're going to think things didn't go the way you wanted. So it'll refresh the screen, and then we should start seeing something in our replicated servers tab. You can see refresh the tools, and there you go. We now have some servers in there that are being replicated. You can see at this point we don't have any synchronized. It just started. Those numbers will go up as it replicates and synchronizes. You can see I'll forward it along here for the sake of, again, time and video. We can start seeing that process happening. And our machines are all healthy, all starting the synchronization replication process. And when we're 100% on that, we can start looking at things like test migration and migrating the actual servers workloads into Azure. Here we go. We can see we're making progress. We already got some that are protected, and we can drill down into that and take a look at what that actually looks like. Everything's protected. Now we're ready for our next phase. So we've verified a healthy replication and our servers are protected. Now we're actually going to take a look at the migration process itself. So definitely want to do a test migration. I'm not going to show that here in the HyperV environment. We're going to go ahead and just look at what migration looks like. But it's always good to do a test migration before you do an actual migration. We check our machines that we want to migrate, and we got the migrate tab itself. And looks like we're getting some information regarding cores, so I'm going to have to request a little bit of quota for that migration, but we'll do that, and then I'll go ahead and start that migration process. Quota basically means when you start a tenant, you get a certain amount of processing power in that tenant, but you may need to request more resources from Microsoft initially if you have a large environment. A small environment, usually not that much to worry about. We notice this machine specifically is having an issue, and this is all related to quota. We can drill down into the details on this, and in this specific case actually it's not quota, it's that this specific type of VM is not available in that West US 2 region. So we're going to need to go and change that, alter that machine type to a machine type that is supported in that region. It's always good in videos to show you the things that happen, that you have to think about when you're actually doing these migrations. A lot of times you see videos and everything just looks like it always works perfect, and we know in life that isn't always the case. But we can tell here we have some protected machines. We've got some of the stuff's finished. And we can see the machines that have finished, it turns them off in our on-premise environment, and then they will be running in the Azure environment, which we'll take a look at. So let's go ahead and take some more looks at what we're, this migration that's happening here. We can take a look at our jobs, see what's successful, what was failed. We'll drill down into that failed one that we were looking at earlier. Get the details on that. As we noticed a little bit ago, we need to work on this machine type. Our other machine's replicated fine, but let's go ahead and fix this one. That's another great thing about the tool. Even though we had an issue, it didn't kill the whole job. It went ahead and did the majority of the job, and then it's allowing us to just make some changes and just restart the replication of the migration process on this specific machine. So we can take a look at, in the recovery vault itself, at the replicated items that we have here, and we can notice that, drill down on that and take a look at the compute network piece and actually alter those settings from that F1. Notice that that's what's there. We can hit edit and we can alter the type of machine because it notified us that that machine's not available in that region. So we can go ahead and pick an equivalent machine, maybe in like the D series. In this case I picked a B series machine just for demonstration. And we can update that configuration, and then we can restart our migration. Now you can also do this out of the Azure Migrate portal too. I just bounced over into the site recovery piece because maybe I'm just a little too familiar with Azure in some cases, but once we get back in here, we can see our replicated servers have changed because we've migrated some machines. And here's where we can do a test migration. I didn't show that earlier, but let's go ahead and take a look. And in this case, we'll do a test migration on this one that we just changed. We can see we get some nice statistics here regarding the server. And we can edit the same screen. It's just gotten out of a different place. This is where you would want to go out of the Azure Migrate piece to edit that. You can see I've already edited it to a B machine. And we can go ahead and just have that test migration going right there. And we want to pick a network for it to test migrate over to. We didn't talk too much about the networking piece, but basically in Azure, as you set up Azure Migrate, you want to pick a network that the machines are going to migrate into. That's going to be your production network or your test network if you're moving test machines. But the virtual network in Azure that you but Azure Migrate's going to take care of that for you when you set it up. So it's not too much you have to worry about. And we're going to go ahead and start that test migration. And then notice it's successful. Now we're going to clean it up. We just say, hey, everything went well with the test. Of course, your validation is going to take longer than me. I'm just validating the machine came over and it looked good. And we're cleaning up that environment. So when we test, we need to clean up the environment so then we're ready to start a full migration. So we can go back into Azure Migrate. See, we now have our servers that we tested. We still have our replicated servers. So we're going to, this machine that we didn't bring over, we're going to go ahead and do the migration process on that machine. And we can tell it to shut down the on-premise or not. And like earlier, that's going to happen. And then the machine, we can see, is off in the Azure Portal. Our migration has been completed. And if we take a look at our virtual machines in Azure, we're going to start seeing all these VMs that we migrated over. So we have a lot of VMs in here. So if you see, there's our AZ Migrate CentOS, the 2012-2016 machine. Here's the 2016 machine. So just to wrap everything up, I'm going to throw our information back up here. Feel free to reach out at this email address and contact me directly. A reminder again of what Azure Migrate does and what it provides. And just what we went through today. The portal setup, the prereq checks, set up the configuration appliance, discovery, assessment, migrate, and really just like to thank everyone for watching our videos.